Welcome to Veggy 360. In today's video, I'd like to talk about how to get the most from your garden. If you haven't built or started your garden yet, I would encourage you to check out my video in the description below on how to start your fall garden. Even though this is March right now and I talk about how to start a fall garden in that video, the design principles are going to be the same. Now today, I'd like to talk about how to plan for success. This video is part of a spring gardening series, and if you happen to miss any of the other videos in this series, not a problem. You can catch it in the description below. I'll provide some links to those videos. Now, with regard to planning your garden, there's some things that you need to think about first, such as what do you want to plant, how much do you want to plant, when should you plant, and how long can you grow in the garden. Do you want to do just a summer garden, or do you want more of a spring, summer, fall? Maybe even you're lucky enough to live in a climate that you can actually grow year-round. So keep those things in mind as you design or plan out your garden. So let's start with what to plant and how much. You want to start by making a list of the types of veggies that you and your family like to eat. Of the cool season crops, these are the ones that you plant in the spring and the fall. These would be radishes, carrots, spinach, broccoli, cabbage. Also, list out the warm weather crops. These are the ones that you plant in the summer, like the peppers, eggplant, tomatoes, cucumber, squash. Think about how much of each of these types of veggies that you want to eat. Look at this list and decide how many plants you want to plant. If you're like us, we eat a ton of tomatoes. We actually put in about 25 tomato plants each year, plus the ones that we grow in containers up on our deck. Or you could be somebody that doesn't eat a lot of tomatoes, and then you're going to want to plan for just 1 or 2, maybe 3 tomato plants. So keep in mind how much of each you want to plant. How much space do you have available to work with? Look at your square footage. Is it in-ground beds or raised beds, or maybe you're growing in containers? Make note of how much space you have. You want to be able to maximize the growing space. If you have in-ground beds, you're going to be planting in rows, the traditional way, where you have a row of seeds that you plant, you leave X number of feet between rows so that you can actually have room to walk and harvest your and care for your vegetables. Now, if you're in raised bed, check the back of the seed packet for the guidelines or the suggestions for the plant spacing on that one. Now, if you're planting in raised beds, and assuming your beds are no more than 4 feet wide, you can easily reach in from each side, and therefore you don't need to be walking in the raised bed and compacting the soil. That in mind, you can plant your plants closer together. You don't have rows. You instead plant on a grid or matrix pattern. You can use either the square foot gardening spacing or a high density, high intensive plant spacing. I'll include links for those spaces as well. You also want to consider the sun exposure in your garden. Most plants need 6 to 8 hours of sun per day, but within any given garden, you're going to have microclimates. These are areas within the garden that get either more sun or less sun than the rest of the garden. Take advantage of these spaces. So for vegetables that don't need as much sun, these would be your leaves and roots types of vegetables, like your leafy greens, spinach, kale, collard greens, and your root vegetables like radishes, carrots, and potatoes. They don't need as much compared to your fruits, which need full sun. This would be the tomatoes, peppers, eggplant, squash, cucumbers. These need full sun. So place these in the garden so that they get as much sun as possible. Now let's talk about when to plant and how long you can grow. The length of your growing season is going to dictate how much your garden can actually produce. The critical dates to keep in mind are your last frost date in the spring and your first frost date in the fall. This will determine what your growing season is. Check the description below for sites where you can determine what these critical dates are. Now you can cheat and extend the growing season a little bit with things like a low tunnel or a cloche, which is simply just a cover that goes over your plants to offer some frost protection. There's also techniques for warming the ground in the spring, so you can actually get in earlier, but that's a subject for another video. Now, how many seasons do you plan on growing? Do you want to do summer only, or do you want to do spring, summer, and fall? You want to maybe even grow year-round for maximum yield from your garden. You're going to want to draw out your plan. Once you've established what you want to plant and when to plant it, draw the plan out for each month. It's important to draw this out so that you can maximize the use of your growing space. Now let's talk about some tools for drawing out your plan. It can be as basic as using graph paper, pencil, paper, eraser, draw it out. Or you can get more sophisticated and use some of the newer garden design software options that are available. Some of them are free and others require paid subscription. The one that I use is from growveg.com. It is a paid subscription, but let me tell you, it's definitely worth the price. This is a garden that I designed using the GrowVeg garden planner. It's a series of raised beds that are 4 feet wide by 8 feet long. And this is what it's going to look like in the spring with the cool weather crops. As I added the vegetables to the plan, the software correctly spaced out the plants so that I know exactly how many of each variety to place in each bed. This is what the garden will look like in the summer with the warm weather crops. I will have 6 tomato plants that will be trellised in order to make use of the vertical space and save space within the garden. I've placed the trellises on the north side of the bed, which is the top of the page, so that they don't shade out the other vegetables growing in these beds. I've also included several varieties of flowers within each bed to not only add beauty, but also attract the pollinators and the beneficial insects. The software also provides a list of the vegetables along with a count of each variety and the recommended spacings. When you enter the zip code, it shows you the planting times and harvest times based on the frost dates in your area. I particularly like this feature because it allows me to better plan for maximum use of the beds, because I know when to start the seeds indoors and when to transplant or direct sow them into the garden. I also know when to expect to harvest. By watching these harvest dates, I will know when a vegetable is going to be done, and I'll be able to pull it out and replace it with a follow-on crop. Now, it's important for you to keep your plants from year to year. This will help you in proper crop rotation. Now, some people don't believe in crop rotation, but for me, where I have root knot nematode in certain areas of my garden, I know that the susceptible plants like tomatoes, okra, and beets, I can't plant those in the same space year after year. I need to wait several years before planting them in that space again. So keep track of those plans, practice good crop rotation, and you'll be good. Now that you've got your plan in place, it's time to start planting. Ha! This is the best part. In the early spring, you can get a jump start on the season by winter sowing. I did a video on that one. Check that one out. Or you can sow your seeds indoors a set number of weeks before the last frost date, and there's guides for how many weeks ahead to plant your seeds. Johnny's actually has an excellent chart. Click the link in the description below for that guide. Some seeds are better sown directly in the garden. You can get them in earlier than normal by providing frost protection like this mini hoop house or low tunnel or a cloche. As the weather warms, you harden off your frost-tolerant seedlings and start moving them into the garden. Because weather is unpredictable, particularly in the spring, keep an eye on the weather forecast. If you see a unusually cold snap coming through, make sure that you plan accordingly and provide frost protection for those vegetables. After the last frost and as weather continues to warm, have your warm weather transplants ready to put in. You can replace your spent cool weather crops with these warm weather seedlings, and that way you're maximizing the use of your space. In the fall, pull those warm weather crops out and have your cool season transplants ready to put in their place. That way you're maximizing the use of your garden space. If you enjoyed this video and learned something today, please hit the subscribe button, and please feel free to share with your gardening friends and family. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye now.